If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you so much for your support. I'm so glad you found Be the Good with Kate and would love to hear from you. If you would like to help me in reaching more people, I would be thrilled if you would share via Instagram, Facebook, email, or however you can. Every single share, subscriber, like, review, comment, and so on helps me to share these guests' wonderful work to more people. Thank you for your help. Each of us has the power to make a difference. So now on to this week's episode. Let's spread a little more goodness in the world.
Welcome back to Be the Good with Kate. Today's guest is a dad who is working to change the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction after losing his oldest son and wife. He is the founder of Choices Network Limited and the Living Undeterred Project, as well as author of This One's For You, An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning. This intro but skims the surface of all I've read about him, and I know there's so much more still. So Jeff Johnston, thank you so much for being here.
Well, Kate, it's an honor to be on the show. And I just, like every time I go into these, I'm super excited to meet a new person and to share new stories and to see if we can help each other and other people along the way.
Well, thank you. I know it's a deeply personal story, and you're right. You have such a way. I've already, just from reading about you, you can see how you have been just letting the people around you be inspired for sure. So thank you. So please tell us more about who you are and what you do in your own words.
Yeah, I'm 56 years old, and 5 years ago, or actually 6 years ago, on October 4th, 2016, which ironically, was just yesterday. And I don't know when this will post, but it doesn't matter. The point is, you're the first podcast I'm doing since yesterday, which was a very, very difficult day for me. And I'll talk about this, but 6 years ago on that day, I was 50. I was on top of the world. I started an investment company at age 23 and had worked, 100 hours a week and went broke and borrowed money and built up this firm that I felt that I reached that point in that life when you kind of look back and you pat yourself on the back. And I was happily married, 3 boys, financially doing well, respected from the community. I had all the stuff that you try to do, that you aspire to do when you're younger. And then, the moment you're on top of the world, that seems to be when life sends you subtle reminders, or sometimes very piercing reminders of how precious and how fragile life can be. And on that morning, it was a day of districts, and my oldest son was Seth. He was 23 at the time. Ian was my middle child. He was 15 at the time, and Roman was 13. So all impressionable young men, My wife, Prudence, married 21 years, beautiful. I was, the luckiest man on the planet to have captured her and to marry her, because she was 9 years younger than me and stunningly beautiful and very radiant, and just couldn't have selected a better person to spend my life with. So there I was, Kate, on top of the world, literally, just milking in every moment of my life. There were cracks. I was a functional alcoholic for, 30 years, been drinking since 8th to 9th grade, 5 days a week, but I was functional. I could work, my wife was an alcoholic as well. And I was also a compulsive gambler for a long time, which when you're in the investment business, you got to be careful how you present that. So anyway, there I was, 50 years old, and boom, that morning, just like any other beautiful fall day in Iowa, phone rang. I looked at it. And I knew 6:30 in the morning that this person on the other side of the phone had some very bad news. I didn't get calls from this person this time in the morning. And sure enough, they found our oldest son, Seth, dead in a hotel room less than a mile from where his little brother, Ian, was golfing that day for districts. So as Ian was getting ready to compete high school golf districts, the ambulance was at a hotel taking his brother away. And my life just froze. I'm not going to say it stopped, but it froze. And what felt like, 1,000 years was probably, 1,000 seconds all at the same time. It's just a weird, when that happens. And I'm sure you've had moments in your life, Kate, everyone does. You live long enough, it's pretty certain that we all will, some type of pain will enter our life. Certainly wasn't what isn't what I planned on that day. And I had to go home and tell my wife that our son was dead. And that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And then I had to
figure out how I was going to tell my two boys that their older brother was dead. And so that started an amazing journey that gets me to where I am today. And I can honestly tell you, with a whole lot of work, I'm at the best place emotionally, physically, spiritually I've ever been in my entire life. But it's taken a lot of work, and I've fallen off the perch many times. And yesterday was again another reminder. That was the 6-year anniversary of Seth's date of death. And you think after 6 years I'd be prepared, Kate, but yesterday it just hit me really, really, really hard. But so here I am. That's kind of fun. I have lots of gaps I can fill in, but that kind of sets the context for what we can talk about today, and kind of how I got this mindset. I call it the living undeterred mindset now, where the two roads stories kind of, it's important to me. It's like you can become better, or you can become bitter. How I live my life today.
That was a phrase that definitely I noticed right away. That better, not bitter. Was there a moment that you remember just realizing that's what you wanted to do after all of this?
Yeah, it's in my book.
Become better, not bitter.
It's in my book. The day Seth died, I knew that I had to tell the boys that their brother was dead. I called my dad. My dad's a retired doctor. He's delivered babies. He's held the hands of people who have died. Very pragmatic. I've learned a lot from my dad. He's 90 and he's still alive. And he said, Jeff, here's what you do. You tell them the truth, and then you shut your mouth. And, I have attention deficit, so I like to talk. And he knew that I would try to explain to the kids what happened. And so I thought, okay, I will. So I had 6 hours to kind of prepare for this before the kids got home, because Ian was playing golf that day and Roman was going to get off the bus. So they came home, and, I still just remember that day. I mean, Roman's 13, getting off the bus, wanting to go play with his friends, and Ian had a really tough day on the golf course, and this team missed qualifying for state, and they just weren't probably realizing what I was about to tell them. So I sat them down and I said, boys, I have some really bad news. Your brother's dead. And you can just imagine. You can just imagine a room when somebody says that. And it was a matter of seconds, Kate, and my middle son looked up and he said, Dad, how'd he die? Drugs. Because they knew at 15 and 13 that's what was going to take their brother was drugs, because we had been on a 6-year journey of hell. Pardon my French if I can't swear on your podcast, but started with Adderall at 16. I talk about it in my book with attention deficit, which the fact we call it a disorder is a whole nother hour podcast I could talk about that irritates the heck out of me. I have attention deficit. It's never been a disorder. It's been the best thing I've ever been blessed to have in my life. And the way we frame it to kids is just criminal today. And I'm on a crusade against trying to change that narrative. So anyway, Seth believed that unless he took Adderall, he'd become a werewolf and eat people. And I got addicted to Adderall and started taking it and so forth. So anyway, I'll come back to that. But so that moment I said, yeah, drugs. And then I stopped. I didn't say anything. And I just had this thing in my stomach say, Jeff, when you asked your wife to marry you, you knew there'd be moments. You knew I call them husband moments, or when you have a child and you're in the hospital and you're holding that baby, there's going to be tough times, that. But this moment with that child is just so special. You kind of forget about it. But I knew that this was that dad moment that you hear about. This was the husband moment, that the next words out of my mouth were going to frame and really dictate the quality of the rest of our lives as a family unit. And so I kind of had this halftime speech. I'm hyper competitive. I have imposter syndrome. I always think that whenever I see someone doing something better, I want to do better. So I thought to myself, I can't drop the ball. I have to say something impactful. So I cleared my voice, and this is a chapter in my book called The Two Roads. And this is where the better, bitter kind of idea came to fruition. And I said, boys, we have one of two roads to go down. We have a road of anger, despair, and hatred. We'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves, or we have a road of inspiration and motivation. And this can be the single greatest moment in our lives and those around us to make a difference. I'm on the second road, and I ask you to join me. And I just kind of thought, wow, dude, you hit a home run there. It's like, I didn't practice. I didn't rehearse it. I have no idea where it came from. I'm agnostic, so I can't attribute it to, a celestial entity. It just came out of my mouth. And boy, they did. My two boys were amazing. Ian went on to raise like $30,000 in high school golf to honor his brother. They named an award after him while he was still in high school called the Ian Johnston Award, which I get to present next week at the high school banquet. We have a scholarship named as well. He won the American Junior Golf Association Jerry Cole Sportsmanship Award in junior golf, which they picked a one boy or girl in the world for something they do good off the course. And Ian won that. So, and my son, Roman, wrote lyrics and sang songs. And both my boys took what I said, but you know what's interesting, Kate? I didn't. My wife and I drank every day for 14 months, and I didn't want to live, but I didn't want to die. And as I was watching my sons do these heroic things, I was absolutely spiraling out of control. And it got so bad on December 24th, 2017, I woke up after my wife and I were drunk, and I looked in the mirror and I said, that's it. That's it. I haven't had a drop since. It's been the easiest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. I'm not giving up alcohol because that assumes that I'm missing it. I don't call myself sober because that implies I'm in a fight. I just choose not to drink. It's that simple for my mind, because I'm not that smart. I never made honor roll in high school. I'm not a highly intelligent human. I practiced a lot of stoicism back in college, and I love the idea of reframing. I think that really can empower us to take a situation and reframe it. So for me, I don't play the narratives. I don't keep count how many days I have not drank, because I don't really care. I just know today, right now with you, I'm not drinking. And so, but unfortunately, and I really quit initially. The genesis was to help my wife, because I was watching Prudence just drink. And I just felt terrible for her, because losing a child is something you can't explain it to somebody. It's just impossible, especially for a mom who birthed Seth. And I couldn't judge her. I couldn't help her. And on June 29th of 2021, I buried her for alcoholism, was a cause of death. And she lost her fight. And I miss both of them immensely. And I have a saying that I like to, it's on all my shirts, the Living Undeterred shirts. It says, purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. Mm-hmm. Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And for me, this is intimately personal on many fronts. And I plan on doing this Living Undeterred project, helping other people till my last breath. That's what I want to do the rest of my life. So I quit my investment company. Haven't missed a day of it. And I do this full time. And with attention deficit, I never run out of ideas. So I'm constantly coming up with new creative ways to honor my son and my wife, but I want to live for those that are living,
I know that I can't personally even begin to fathom that moment of you've lost two of the closest people to you, and yet you decided to keep reliving it in a way so that you could help others. Would you share how you decided, you said that like the minute that Seth passed away, you knew you were going to do something. How did it take form in the nonprofit Choices Network, and how did the Living Undeterred Project come out of that?
Yeah, I think what really happened was, I'll be honest with you, is Ian's golf. I think that couple nights later, Ian said, well, Dad, every time I make a birdie, I want to donate some money to help kids. I know it's just amazing. And so I reached out to the American Junior Golf Association. They have a program called Leadership Links, and it allows junior golfers to, kind of promote a charity or start a charity. And it's an awesome idea of philanthropy and altruism that we can teach the next generation. The next addicts and alcoholics are the ones that are in middle school and junior high school and high school right now. And so the American Junior Golf Association had this platform, and that was really where it started. I reached out to Beth Doctor at the AJGA, and this is, again, all in my book. And I said, well, we'd like to do something. And so we set up this account with them. And then I started thinking, well, I need to have a nonprofit. If we're going to be raising money and doing these things, I want to be able to put it somewhere. So I went out and started what's called the Choices Network. And the idea was that we would help kids make better choices in difficult situations. But I decided last year we changed the name to the Living Undeterred Project, because that more embodies what I'm really doing on a mental health initiative versus just, my son died from an overdose of heroin laced with fentanyl. That's what he died from. It was fentanyl poisoning. When now that's fentanyl's overdose is the number one killer of Americans from 18 to 44 right now. And fentanyl kills 82% of those people that die from overdose. So when Seth died, it was 46,000 Americans. Last year was 108,000 Americans. Yeah. So, and this is one of my things I talk to people about. Raising awareness really isn't working, because even what fentanyl is. I didn't, but we've had almost 3 times more people die since Seth died. So knowing more about this isn't helping us keep people alive. So we have to figure out other ways to do that. But so, yeah, we started raising money, and then the local newspaper did a story on Ian, which I have framed in the house here, which is a great story by KJ Pilcher, who's become a good friend, sports writer. Then the Des Moines Register did a full page story on the front page about the opioid addiction. And then the term, this one's for you, an Iowa brother raises awareness to honor his, brother, whatever. But it was on the front page of the Des Moines Register, not just the sports section. And then about 6 months later, CBS Sports reached out to us, and they flew out here for 4 days. This was all when Ian was still in high school. And they did a story on this boy from the Midwest who lost a brother. And it ended up getting narrated by Zach Johnston, who's our Ryder Cup captain this year. In New Jersey, Zach was having a tournament, and the CBS Sports producer actually tracked Zach down in his hotel room the night before one of these tournaments. And Zach, being from Cedar Rapids, and Ian and Zach had the same swing coach in high school. And so Zach felt like this is a Cedar Rapids story. And Zach's huge, Iowa guy. He's always talking about how much he loves Iowa. And Zach said, yeah, I will do this. So Zach narrated it for 9 minutes, and it's on the internet. If you just put in Ian Johnston, CBS Sports, you can watch the 9-minute documentary. But so this little snowball started, Kate. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to keep riding this thing, because all I got to do is put in a little bit of energy, and it creates so much more goodwill. And I put in a little bit more, and it creates much more. So I'm getting like 10 times multiple back. This big snowball is going down this mountain, and just all this misery, despair, and hurt was actually turning into something helping people. And that just became a life of its own. And that's when I decided I didn't want to do investments anymore. So I stopped seeing clients and started working on the book. All the time my wife was still alive. And she was really doing very poorly at that time. And so, but I had to stay focused on some task. And so writing the book was important to me. Then I started the podcast, the Living Undeterred podcast, which is in its 2nd year. And then came up with this idea to buy an RV and drive around the United States for 95 days. And never had a chance to tell my wife about that project, because she died right before I got to tell her. But she was on my mind. She was on my mind a lot yesterday, even though it was Seth's death date. She died that day as well.
How did it come about to travel with Living Undeterred? For the listeners too, you have to go to the website, because the graphics paint such a beautiful picture of how you've crossed the country and all that, from that element. But how did you decide this is what's next? We're leaving Iowa, we're going across the country.
You'll laugh, because it's a testimonial to the beauty and the wonder of attention deficit. I was on my elliptical, because I've realized that I have to do 2 things every day or I'm going to die. I have to meditate 20 minutes and I have to run on my elliptical every hour. So that's something I do, like breathing air for me. So I'm on my elliptical running. I jump off, I jump on Twitter, and I see this story of this dad who's riding his bike across, I think it was Iowa, I don't remember, raising money for breast cancer. So purpose becomes passion when it gets personal, right? So this dad's wife or mom or sister has breast cancer. So he's going to go out and raise money. I love it. It's awesome. But I thought to myself, okay, I've done a book, I've done a podcast. I'm not doing enough. I still feel that way. As of this moment, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I'll always feel that way till I die. I always feel like I can be doing better to help myself and help more people. And so I said, okay, well, Iowa's too small. We already have Ragbri here. That's a ride bikes across the state. And I don't want to ride a bike. So I stayed up till 3 a.m. and I'm not embellishing the story. This is true. And I came up with this just idea that I was going to go buy this RV and drive around the United States and call it the Living Undeterred US Tour. I'd never been in an RV. I've never even, test drove, never even camped in one. And so I got up the next morning, I typed this up on the computer. I grabbed about 10 books and I drove up to Camping World, which is 45 minutes north of here, and went in there and talked to the sales manager. Then they knew I was coming up because my neighbor knows a cousin or something that works up there, but they didn't really know what I was coming up for. And I went in there and I said, I'm going on the Living Undeterred US Tour. I want Camping World to be a sponsor. I gave them all copies of the book, and I walked out and bought a 34-foot brand new 2022 Hurricane Thor, and went on social media that night and told everyone what I was doing. And that way I knew I couldn't back out. So a lot of people would have went up there, test drove 4 or 5, kind of came home, talked it over with their spouse, decided if they want to do it or not. And then they would have done what? Talked themselves out of it, like we all do. I said, no, I know me too well. I have to buy it. I did drive it once, but that wouldn't have mattered. I was going to buy it anyway. And I didn't figure out how I was going to go around the United States for 95 days and do this tour. So I went to LinkedIn first, started reaching out to a lot of my advocates and friends that I knew, and they started hooking me up. And the idea was, Kate, is that we would partner up with what are called state partners, and they'd be nonprofits. And we would go around the United States, meet with nonprofits, raise money, raise attention, or whatever. And the initial goal was that I was going to give back half the proceeds net of expenses. Well, I didn't raise much money at all, and I spent an enormous amount of money. So unfortunately, there isn't any money to spread around because I lost a lot of money. I'm not asking for people to send me money to make up for it. I'm going to go find a way. I already have ways. I'm working on that to raise the $1 million that I said I was going to raise. It just wasn't going to be 95 days. It may be 95 weeks, but I'm going to raise $1 million. So, but I learned a lot. The tour was an eye-opening experience for me. It was so much. I was very intentional, Kate, about not making this about me, not turning this into a narcissistic journey around the United States, telling my story, although I have to tell the story to kind of crack that door. But what I really learned was the beauty and the power of vulnerability, and having intimate human conversations with strangers is the most powerful weapon we have against mental health, substance use distress, and addiction, I think. And yesterday's a good example. You saw my post. I was very distraught yesterday, had a very tough day. And I shut my phone off. But when I turned it on the next day, the amount of people that really sincerely care about Jeff Johnston and my 2 boys is just something I can't pay back. I can't let people know how good that makes me feel, that there are actually, people out there that have been friends, that are new friends, that have never met me, that can resonate with my story. They maybe can't relate to having a child and a spouse die, but they can relate to whatever their own pain is, Because I've said before, Kate, comparing grief is a dangerous thing. And if you aren't married and you don't have kids and your pain is burying your cat, well, that's just as important. That's just as painful as losing a child, for someone who doesn't have children. So I'm really sensitive on trying to learn a lot about suffering and pain and grief and all that. And then maybe through my story, be able to help people deal with their own challenges they have,
Just to really hone in on that part that you mentioned about how people reached out to you, how you shared your stories, how you're connecting with strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just how much in this world could be, I don't know if fixed is the right word, but like just helped so much if we just did that more. I mean, learning about each other, listening to people. I mean, how often does someone just need to be heard? Right. And so you are opening those doors through the nonprofit, but also through something like sharing a piece about your day on Instagram, on social media, and other people hear, okay, he's been through all of this. I'm struggling too. We share that. Someone else has been there, just all of that.
Well, there's something about the way we are doing it that isn't working. 800 Americans are dying each day from overdose, alcohol, and suicide. 800 a day. Okay. Put that in the bank for a minute. Think about the collateral damage that goes with that. And think of the families that death hasn't entered their house yet. That's in the millions. We were a family that was, struggling before Seth died, over his issues, his lying and his deceit and his addictions that he had caused a lot of angst and stress in our family. But 800 Americans are dying each day from overdose, alcohol, and suicide. But look what really is going on out there. When you look at most social media, it's all about how great either your job is, or great how you are, or how great your vacation was, or how great your kids are, how great. And that's how most people present their world to the world, is how great everything is. And I think that causes a tremendous amount of angst, especially for kids, when they see YouTubers making millions and they're like, why am I in college? Why am I not being able to make my car payment? And I think if more people that were in positions of being famous or athletes or whatever could actually show the bad days they're having, to show the moments of just the fact that they're human, I think that would go a long ways to doing more than posting, how big a signing bonus you got, or what type of fancy car you just bought, or what vacation you went on with your family. The allure to show people how better you're doing than other people is intoxicating. And I'm getting better at it. I mean, most posts I try to make aren't trying to do anything other than get people to self-reflect. I'm really intentional now. And it wasn't that way a few years ago. I mean, I selfishly made posts about trips and things like that. But I think now, as I've matured as a human, I'm becoming more intentional. Like my post yesterday, even though it was very spontaneous and raw, now in hindsight, I look back and initially I regretted posting it, but now I don't, because it really got a lot of people in my community really communicate. And people reaching out probably to other people they didn't have that day, because people were really worried about me yesterday. I got to a very dark place yesterday. I've been close to that place a few times. That's how bad yesterday was. And just the outpouring of support, I just couldn't live 200 years and pay back to society what people did to me yesterday. I really couldn't. I just am so grateful to have close friends that are true friends of mine, aren't just friends because of what I used to do, or that I have an RV, or that I have a podcast. They care about me because I'm Ian and Roman's dad, and Prudence's husband, and, my mom and dad's son. That's what they care about me about, and that's authentic. And it's part of the journey of my evolution of myself,
Well, isn't it the day we stop learning is the day that we die too, right? So we're constantly, and that's really interesting with social media, because there is the positive, negative back and forth, right? Like there are times you're excited about something you want to share, but sometimes that excitement does come across to someone else as, well, why is their life perfect? It's like, well, it's not. You're just not always showing all of that. So finding that balance, right? And being able to, I know like when I was in high school, it wasn't perfect, but boy, was I glad that social media did not exist yet.
Well, you and me both, and cell phones. And I mean, all the, I was in high school in the 80s. So it's like, I'm very grateful all that didn't exist. But going back to what you said, Kate, I'm certainly not trying to tell people when your kid wins an award, or your wife gets, agent of the year at the realty firm, or you're in Hawaii drinking Mai Tais. By all means, post that stuff. That's beautiful. Even as hard it is to see people post their wedding anniversaries, and this last August would have been 22 years for my wife. I mean, it is painful. It like pours salt in the wound. And Valentine's is hard for me. Christmas is hard for me. People don't realize that, but they're not posting those things to hurt me. That's my interpretation. And so I need to just change my lens and need to say, you know what? I'm going to be grateful for the fact that most people I know have not been through what I've been through. And that's what I want. I don't want Kate to bury a child and bury her husband. I don't want you to have to go through that. So why would I feel bad if you post something about you and your husband and your kids out vacationing? Why don't I just feel just as happy, as I would if I knew you real well, or if I was part of your family,
Isn't that really a conversation that keeps coming up now, right? With that social media kind of tailspin of you want to be happy for people, but it also makes you feel awful. And
right.
Their job is better, their thing is worse, they're this and that. Like it is. And it's going to keep being a conversation for a long time, I'm sure.
Go to college, or someone's going to the Air Force and they couldn't get into the Army. I think it's very difficult for kids to be simultaneously happy for their peers when they're doing well, but not at the same time jealous.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But then again, I can see a parent proud, like I am with Ian, if he ever won a college tournament, I'd post it on social media. So am I being a hypocrite? I don't know what I'm being.
this whole new world of technology, isn't it? Yeah. It's a constant, speaking of one more thing to add into the brain. But going with those moments, like you said, with Ian and the golf and everything, what are some of the, I like to call them good news moments that you have gotten to witness since in sharing your story? Maybe someone that has come back to you and said, thank you because, or with your sons, and you've already given some amazing examples, but if there's anything else you wanted to highlight.
There's a story in my book when Ian won the Jerry Cole Sportsmanship Award. See, there I go, promoting my son, right? I just got done telling people not. So Ian won this award and he got invited to speak at the Rolex Junior All-American banquet down in Florida. Well, part of the deal, if you raise enough money, is you get to play 9 holes of golf with Ricky Fowler. What kid wouldn't want to play golf with Ricky Fowler, right? Ricky's like the ambassador for youth golf. He's awesome. And so we got to go down there and play golf. Well, I was so excited. I got to watch Ian and Ricky play with 7 under kids. Ricky does this every year, by the way. Ricky's an amazing advocate for kids. He's him and Zach Johnston both are tremendous. Zach does his big tournament here every year that raises millions of dollars. But anyway, so about the 4th hole, and I write about this in my book because this was a very important story that talks about vulnerability. But this couple came up to me. They were in their golf carts. They're an older volunteer couple that works this tournament every year. And they had heard about our story. It saw something in the bio for Ian. And they said, well, first of all, it's great what your son's done to raise money. But how did your son die? And I said, well, he overdosed with heroin laced with fentanyl, and didn't say much. And they took off. And about 2 holes later, I see out of the corner of my eye them flying back up the fairway to me. I thought, oh man, I hope I didn't say something to make him mad or something. They pulled up and they said, Mr. Johnston, can we ask you a question? And these people were in their 70s. And I said, sure, go ahead. And she goes, the grandma goes, was it hard for you to tell people it was heroin? The stigma. And I said, no, it would be hard for me not to tell people it was heroin. And she said, well, thank you, because I didn't tell you this the first time, but our grandson overdosed with heroin laced with fentanyl. And we have a hard time telling our friends it was heroin. And that's that stigma that heroin implies Seth was an addict, implies Seth was a loser. And I tell you, I'm breaking that barrier down each day, because I tell everybody heroin, I'll help you spell it. Fentanyl, I'll help you spell it. Opioid, I'll help you spell it. We need to talk about these things. And generations ago, when grandma died of alcohol abuse, you didn't know about that. They just said grandma died. And then you wonder why these cycles continue, because no one ever steps up, draws a line in the sand and says, this is what happened. And so I think we are seeing that now. More actors, more athletes, when they lose loved ones to overdose, you'll say them now. They battled an addiction. They lost their fight to overdose or alcohol. But that story really stands out to me, because there was that generational difference in how I was looking at the stigma with addiction and substance use distress as an opportunity to talk about heroin and overdose and fentanyl. And they were more caught in that generation where you didn't talk about that. I thought it's a really interesting kind of the handing the baton, like they were passing on that responsibility to me, because their generation kind of dropped the ball.
Mm.
You know, we've been trying not to trigger people for all these years, but the numbers keep getting worse.
Mm.
So do we just continue not to talk about these things directly, call them what they are, and maybe see if the numbers can get better, or we just continue going down the same roads of how we've been doing things and just expect things to get better? I don't know. I'm more of a person to tweak things a little bit. Maybe we should try a different side door approach instead of just the traditional ways we've done things.
And that is good. That is something definitely, like you were saying, this starting to see it become a little bit more of that, right? There's more talking about it. There's more, and there, going back to social media, there is a bit of a positive, right? Is being like, look, you're not alone. Talk about mental health, bring it up. Even just the idea of like therapy. When I was growing up, anyone who went to therapy didn't say it. Right. It was kind of like, oh, I have an appointment to go to. Right. And now people are like, oh yeah, that my therapist is down the street, you know, blah, 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 and all of that. And
almost like a gardener now. It's like, yeah, it's like everyone has it's like, you don't have a therapist. Yeah. And I like that. You're right. Social media has done social media has actually done great things for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And just people talking about it, you know, to each other. I've noticed a big shift. So that is really, really good. That there is a step in the right direction there of more of that communication about things, even with parents and children, and just having more open lines of communication about kind of everything.
So what's your thoughts on how we can talk to our kids more about mental health? Do you have any ideas on that?
I mean, as someone who doesn't have a child, I feel like there's, you know, I can't say firsthand experience.
Oh yeah, you can. You can talk about it still. Yeah.
But even the openness of communication is something that I've thought about a lot. And I see in different families, you know, some are very much like, we don't talk about these things, don't talk about these things. It's like what we were saying before. And others are very much more like, we talk about everything. Sometimes to the point where I see families, I'm like, you talk about this with your parents, you know, that aspect of like teenagers and parents, but it's like, that's great. There's no secrets. It's open. It's, you know, and different things work for different families, but I always am more, I feel like really good about when those lines are open.
When I see advertisements and things on social media about talk to your kids about drugs, talk to your kids about safe sex, talk to your kids about alcohol, I just cringe, because that's so antiquated and medieval approach. We talk about how to make better choices, and all the other stuff just is consequent. It's incidental. It doesn't matter, because if we can teach kids at a young age, choices precede consequences, and you're going to have choices to make as you get older. Some you're going to make, and you're going to make the wrong choice, and it's cemented as a wrong choice if you don't learn. It's not a wrong choice if you don't learn anything. I tell my son that when he golfs, you could shoot the worst round of your career. If you walk off that course and you've learned nothing, then you just cemented the worst round of your career. But if you walk off the course saying, I learned something today, it's not the worst round of your career. Life's the same way. You can make a choice and you could go to prison. You can make a choice and lose your marriage. Let's say you cheat on your spouse, or you cheat on your taxes and you get arrested. If you don't learn from that, then you've actually cemented that as a poor choice. It's only a poor choice if you don't learn. So, and that's what we need to be having conversations with kids, not don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't do this, don't do that, because you know what? It didn't work when our parents told us that. So why the heck do we think it's going to work when we tell our kids that as well? So that's an area that I feel I missed an opportunity with Seth. So if I play the game of regret, if I go back and say, okay, I have a chance to do this over again. So many of the things I would have done exactly the same thing. I would have, when he got out of prison, he asked to come back in the house. I said, no. I said, your mom's a wreck. Your two boys are looking up at me. That ship has sailed. The last thing I said to my son in the garage, Seth, you need to quit drinking. I went in the house, shut the door. I never saw him again. Now, would it be normal for me to sit there and go, man, I should have let him back in after prison? I should have let him back in. I should have given him a second chance. What good is going down that road? I didn't. And I swear, if I had the chance again, I would do the same thing again. I had to protect 4 people versus 1. And that's the tough choices you make when you're a dad or a mom. You know, tough choices we have to make. But There were a few things I do look back though, Kate, and I do say I should have understood what Adderall was instead of trusting the doctors. Should have maybe got a second opinion. I should have done a better job when Seth was really little about teaching him how to make better choices, not making the right choice, but how to make better choices. There's a big difference.
Yeah, the difference of like the don't do this, the pointiness.
Yeah,
right?
that just doesn't work.
Don't do that.
It doesn't work.
The open,
Yeah.
in the talking about it, the making the choices, learning. Yes.
Yeah. And, when I talk to high schools, I say, one bad choice, Seth putting heroin in his arm with fentanyl, that cost him his life. But it was that first beer he had in 7th grade at that football game.
Mm.
And it was the second beer he had the next night. And it was the marijuana he had that everyone was doing because 10 states, it's legal. Those are the little choices that led up to that hotel room with heroin laced with fentanyl. Mm. So that first choice he made was just as impactful as the last one he made. So when I talk to kids, I talk about the building effect of poor choices. You make one poor choice, at least another poor choice. You can make 3 or 4 poor choices, but then self-assess, understand where you're at on the spectrum there, and then go back to the better road. You can make poor choices. Most poor choices don't cost you your life. But in Seth's, it was a 6-year journey of numerous poor choices. Same as my wife. I hate to throw any of them under the bus, but again, their deaths are for nothing if we don't learn. Mm-hmm. Just like I said, right? So I have to learn. And so with my wife, again, I missed opportunities as a husband. I didn't do a good job early on identifying our alcoholism. I drank when Seth was struggling. Now I wish I would have been able to have the courage to have been sober back then. Maybe Seth would have seen dad become sober, but no, he saw dad drinking. So I had kind of allowed that to happen under my watch. So yeah, I do have lots of things I look back at but I don't torture myself with guilt very often. If I do.
You took it and you said, how can I go forward, which is what you're doing now. And it takes us back to everything you've been doing and the Living Undeterred Project and all of this with finding ways to educate, to bring awareness, to change the narrative, which I love that phrase. You used it. I had a former guest who was formerly incarcerated who also used that phrase, changing the narrative. And that's a really powerful phrase and really paints such a picture of what the good you are doing now.
And let's talk about that a second, because I had, when I was on the tour, I had a TV station in Indianapolis was interviewing me before I had to speak. And she said, what does changing the narrative mean? And I've been asked that before, and I've always answered it horribly because I kind of babble and, say something sounds like a politician, it's kind of like a setup question. It's like an unanswerable question, first of all. And so I decided not to answer it. So what I said was this: how do you change the narrative? I'll answer it this way. If what we were doing was working, I wouldn't be here in Indianapolis right now. That's it. That's my answer now to almost anything anyone says. What question are you trying to answer? Sure. What are you trying to accomplish? Blah, 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 blah. I'm not trying to eradicate addiction. I'm not really trying to do anything. I'm just simply saying if what we were doing was working, I'd be selling cars right now. I wouldn't be doing this. The reality is what we're doing isn't working. And there's really good people like Seth and Prudence and all the other people I met on this journey that have lost loved ones to, suicide and alcohol and drugs that simply don't have to die. Now it's every day. If you click on the internet, you almost expect to see the name of an actor, the name of a country music player, the name of a heavy metal guitarist, the name of a politician's son. Somebody's dying every single day from either suicide, overdose, or alcoholism every single day, and I'd like to say I'm optimistic it's going to get better. I think it can get better. And we have an initiative we're working on that I'm going to be announcing here probably around the first of the year that we think is going to really be impactful for adolescents with mental health that we're developing here right now. And I'll be announcing that probably around the first of the year.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, because boy, do we need it so much. And thank you for being so fervently motivated to make these changes. I have one more question for you,
Mhm.
Jeff, before we talk about where people can find you
Yeah.
online. If someone came to you and they wanted to make a difference, and it can be specific to mental health or in general, but they don't know where to start, they don't know how to start, what would you tell them?
I would say the first thing I would do if I had to kind of unwind my journey and go back to the first genesis behind why I wanted to make a difference is ask yourself that question. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to make a difference? Is it for me, and I know people like to say, well, Jeff, you're helping thousands of people, but selfishly, Kate, I'm helping Jeff Johnston. And I benefited a lot by unloading on you and your listeners. And that was therapeutic for me. So I don't have a therapist because what I do every day is therapy for me. And so again, if your motivations are to build a rehab facility and make millions of dollars, well, good luck. Because you know what? It's easy to do. There's a lot of money in that. If your goal is to build a teen center and help teens make better choices, there's probably not a lot of money in that, but it's very rewarding, or to build an online app or to write a book, find a genuine, authentic reason. But go back to that quote I always say, purpose becomes passion when it gets personal, and the last thing I'll say, and this is one of my favorite things I got out of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, was he says, suffering is my opportunity. And I kind of rephrased it. So I like this quote, and this is something that I think all your listeners would benefit from. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is a choice. And I don't mean suffering by definition. I mean the length of time we suffer. The intensity of the suffering is a choice. The act of suffering probably isn't a choice, but how long we dwell in it and linger and are captured in thought, that is a choice, I think. I'm convinced it is for me. And I can't avoid the pain of losing a son. I cannot avoid the pain of losing my wife, but I can certainly choose the length and the duration and the intensity of the suffering that I have every day. And I try to keep that lifespan very limited. But when it happens hard and it hurts. But I look forward to when it's over, because I feel like I had a mental health workout, So there is optimism. There's hope. Keep living undeterred. There's a lot more good things going on in the world than there are bad. I'll tell you that.
Jeff, thank you. Please tell us where we can find you online, the website, and find your book.
Yeah, the easiest thing is just go to livingundeterred.org, and the book is available there. The podcast is on there. My podcast is called Living Undeterred. I also did the book as an audio book. And personally, I think that's probably what I would recommend people doing, because it's in my voice. And it's a lot more, I think you'll get a lot better feel of really the journey we went down the day that Seth died. And the book was published prior to my wife dying, though. And one thing I will throw out there, Seth's daughter was born 3 weeks after he died. So I have the most precious, beautiful 5-year-old grandbaby. Her name is Brighton. And she doesn't have a dad, and her mom is gone. So she's 5 and doesn't have a dad and a mom. But you know what? I'm not going to let that be a reason as she gets older to make that be an excuse to have her life unravel. So we talk about Seth every day. And I wrote the book. So when she's older, all those stories that were in my head about Seth now are on paper. She can learn about her dad the right way.
You're a remarkable person, Jeff Johnston. Thank you so much.
I didn't think so yesterday.
But like you said, you had your mental health work
Yep.
out and listened to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. I enjoyed the opportunity. I hope this conversation helped somebody today.
Thanks so much for listening to Be the Good with Kate Chericello. Whether you're listening on YouTube or via podcast, it would mean the world if you liked, subscribed, and or left a review. You heard about the good? Now go out and be the good in your life this week. If you have stories of good news that need to be shared, please send me a message. Thanks again, and have a great week.